How's everyone doing? My name is Coleman. Welcome back to the 21st Talks podcast. Today, I had the incredible opportunity to talk with my close friend, Emmanuel Daudu, who is a junior here at Cornell University, where he does prison reform work, along with a ton of really, really interesting and really, frankly, important, critical political work, and is aiming to discuss and explore topics related to not just prison reform, but also larger societal ramifications of such reform, working class struggle, working class involvement in the 21st century politic, and critically, the underlying issues that led to so many of the woes that we see when we look out into the political landscape and cultural landscape around us today at this point in the 21st century. The conversation is primarily focused on an American context, so I apologize for our international listeners. One of our international listeners out of like the rapidly growing number of y'all who I deeply appreciate you guys tuning in from all over the world. I think currently we're at like 38 countries, which is incredible. Every continent except Antarctica now, which is fantastic. But there's one Lithuanian listener. Whoever you are, please leave a comment down below. What is this? You're a religious listener as well. You've listened to almost every episode. I want to know what my appeal is to a Lithuanian audience, because that's that the size of that of your state. I'm speaking directly now to you, Lithuanian, who listens to this. The size of your state. Country, I should say, nation state is what I was meaning. The size of your country is big enough that you can mobilize and do some big things, but not so big that you can't have a collective identity. So let me know, and maybe we could just turn Lithuania into the extras country that just solves all of the existential threats facing humanity, and really fights for human flourishing. For now, at least, we can't rely on the entire country of Lithuania trying to preserve human flourishing. Fight for it this century. So we have to settle, I guess, for really wonderful discussions with one of my favorite interlocutors. And that's what I'm bringing to you guys today. Ooh, dropped right back into the intro. Nice. Yeah, so I had a great time talking with Emmanuel. Again, one of my favorite interlocutors. He has a way with words that really help to navigate some really tricky terrain that otherwise would have been a landmine field for me. We talk about freedom of speech, especially, and I really, really urge y'all to put your comments down below, see how you respond, and voice those responses, because it's an important discussion. And in terms of figuring out how to build a better world going forward, which is, of course, 21st Talk's major communication mission, politics matter. Politics underlie day-to-day life in a way that very few other systems do. And there are reasons for the misshapen appearances and expressions that the political system today take in the world around us, especially in the American context. There's a lot of unnecessary suffering and unoptimized potentials for flourishing. And discussions like the one I had with Emmanuel today and the topics that Emmanuel and I discussed today are trying to flesh out some of the ways in which we can genuinely improve human life this century. Because when people are doing better, they're more likely to do good. And that is empirically backed up. So thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again to Emmanuel. And thank you to Emmanuel's mom and entire family for doing such a great job raising the man. He's incredible. And I will see you guys all next week. Also, thank you very much to our producer, Justin, for throwing this together. Love you, man. All right. Talk to you guys later, and peace out.
Yeah. And then I feel like we're just gonna start talking and stuff will come up, and then we should be open to that,
I agree.
But I think wealth inequality, talking about our political system, talking about the shift from religion to politics is the primary undergirding principle and motivation for people.
I definitely agree, because it's like I know it's in line with, like, you recognize the policy and have studied the policy side and the governmental side a lot more.
Gotcha.
But just like quickly, can you give both as a refresher for me, but also just for people listening, like what is your like academic background?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Emmanuel Daudu. I am a junior at Cornell University. So I study industrial and labor relations with minors in information science and law and society. So that's kind of like where I'm situated academically. So, when it comes to union power, labor economics, that's kind of my bread and butter. Yeah. And then, also in the ethics of information and data specifically ranking algorithms. I look into a lot in my information science.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's really fucking cool to know.
Yeah. So,
how have we not talked about that before?
We talked about so many things.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot, and it generally rotates around like working class stuff and making it more sort of liberating. politics in the 21st century is like a big part of the discussions that we've had that I've like really just like felt myself coming back to time and time again. You know, it's like to the point where like I'll watch them like Emmanuel needs to watch it so I can talk to him about it, you know.
Got you.
But that's fascinating.
Also, you want to talk about Russell Brand later?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, we gotta talk. It connects like what's happening right now with legacy media, and I think Russell Brand is a great like Russell Brand and Joe Rogan both encapsulate this like perfectly, right? They keep having stuff thrown against them, and it's not, and like whether it's terms like conspiratorial or things like that being thrown at them, which I mean to be fair, there is speculation there. Absolutely, there's absolutely some conspiratorial leanings politically, all of that stuff. But I don't think people who are sharing ideas that are critical of power need to de facto be like referred to as like conspiracy theories, right?
Of course.
Because like I think Davos is happening right now, and obviously that's like the where everyone's like, oh, Davos. But like it genuinely is a group of people sitting together who have degrees. It's like people who. There's like a non-zero chance that like it's something that people that we know currently at university will be somehow involved in like 10 years, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's a guarantee. This is Cornell. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%, right? 100%, yeah. I was drinking with some of them last night potentially, right? So we'll see. But yeah, so I mean, luckily, I know that if I ever go to Davos, I can always win Rage Cage against them.
Okay.
Probably not beer pong though. Yeah.
I got you. Yeah, they were talking about what did they call it last night? The
Stat Cup.
Stat Cup.
Dude, it is the worst name for a drinking game.
These Northeast kids, man, that's just how we do over here. We name your stuff. We're taking your West Coast culture and just destroy everything. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so I said in my academic background, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am the co-president of the Prison Reform and Education Project at Cornell University. We run a bunch of programs. We do fundraisers for the Innocence Project. We go and try to connect Cornell undergrads to different facilities around so they can go and see what's going on and how those prison facilities are administered. We try to do petitions to get people off of death row. We do a whole bunch of stuff at the Prison Reform and Education Project. So I'm also the vice president of Budding Branches. It's an educational nonprofit. So what we do is that we connect undergraduates to high school students and sometimes middle school students who are interested in going to college, see if it's right for them, if they can adapt to the academic life, and if it's financially feasible. Our whole mission at Budding Branches is helping socioeconomically disadvantaged students connect to people who are like them in these universities so they can have like kind of the blueprint as they're going into the application cycle. So that's what we're doing. And then I sit on the board of Student Shoulder to Shoulder. So basically it runs a bunch of service trips to promote ethical leadership amongst high school students. And so I actually started out in the program. I did a program. I went to Mexico Tijuana border and I kind of helped out at a shelter giving food because, the caravans are coming up from Central America. Yeah. Really, Tijuana is a nexus of a lot of those people and where they're staying. So I did a lot of work there supporting them. And, that's kind of me, the long and short. I'm sure there are a bunch of other things, but
there's so many things. But as a general overview, I feel like that's I didn't realize you were so involved in Budding Branches or prison reform work. I knew that you had some prison reform, experience, but I did not realize that it was like so deeply, entrenched with like what you are doing day to day.
Oh yeah.
So like what like I think we should talk about prison reform first then.
Okay, bet. Let's
because I'm curious. Like the prison or the sort of like high school to prison pipeline where it's like I'm sure there has to be some joke colloquially thrown around in like cynical circles of like, well, it's like, if you're a high schooler who's like poor, you're either like gonna go to the military or into prison. It's like that. It's like, or you're gonna work a job that you hate and feel miserable at, right? Statistically, that's just like the most likely thing. I think the stat is if you get accepted to Cornell University as a working class student, you're 87 times immediately more likely to become a multimillionaire.
Wow.
That is insane. And Cornell is the most accessible out of any of the Ivies, right?
Definitely.
And we can thank our man Ezra for that. Yeah. That's one white dude from the 1800s who deserves a statue. In my opinion. Like,
he did some good work.
I mean, stolen land issue. So, but yeah. But yeah, nonetheless, we should jump into prison reform situation.
So I think if we're going to start talking about prison reform, I think it always comes from a point of like looking at the individual costs and the human toll it takes. So our system is set up in such a way that the worst decision that you make is this decision you're judged on for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
And not only is that in prison, but it's after prison too, in the way that you're treated with parole, and the way you can't apply to certain jobs, and the way that you're kind of boxed out of certain social circles because you have something on your record. And so when I look at that human cost, that's where my real mission for like doing what I do. So there's this excellent young gentleman. He's a Truman Scholar. His name is Jarrell Daniels. He's an undergraduate at Columbia University. I think he's applying to law school right now. And I think we're applying the same law school application cycle. So I'm like, damn, I gotta compete against this guy. Oh my gosh, dang! Like he does amazing work, and he's so involved in his community up in Harlem, and trying to like get people on the right path to get programs for young people before they end up making those bad decisions that gets them into prison.
Oh yeah.
And ultimately, I think that it's such an important work what he does, and it's inspirational because he went into the system, he did time, right? And he came out and was able to reform his life and do amazing things. The thing is, Jarrell is an exceptional person, right?
Yeah.
And I look at him and like, wow, he's doing amazing stuff. But you know, the efficacy of a system should not be judged on the outliers, but rather what it does for the average person, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at what happens to people who are convicted of crimes wrongly or correctly, their lives afterwards seems to be restricted heavily. And ultimately, it comes down to education and employment. Yeah. Those are the two things for me that I've realized that when people are coming out of prison, serve as major roadblocks for them. You look at people who are coming out of facilities that had some type of education program, right? They are able to catapult themselves further than people who did not have some type of education or certification. It doesn't always have to be college. It can be plumbing or electrician, like some type of training skill set while they're in prison doing time. So by the time they get into the real world, they're actually able to contribute. Because, you know, people who are committing crimes, they don't have a skill set usually that is going to be marketable out there, right?
Yeah, unless it's being a locksmith with lock picking.
Or, you know, I mean, hey, if you can break into the lock and then you help somebody with the lock on the other side, it can happen. So.
But best case, also that's like 1,500 like prisoners. In terms of like that's if you're committing crimes today and your main skill within that context is lock picking, that's weird.
You got to be a scammer nowadays. You got to be a scammer. You know, I mean, that's hey, this is not advice, by the way. This is not advice. This is not advice. But what I'm trying to say is that people, when you have that ability to get the training, it's so important for you in having success later on. And then employment. Let's say you don't have training, but you have to go and get a job somewhere. You don't have any particular skills that are super, catching to an employer. You're going to be having to say, yeah, I went to prison. Yeah, I was convicted of this felony. I'm an ex-felon. I'm a current felon, whatever, right? And people are not going to hire you, right? Yeah. And, I was applying. I was just going through the application cycle previously in order to get the internship that I'm doing this summer. And I saw it consistently. Did you go to prison? Did you do time? And, there's going to be such an amount of discrimination against those people because you're being judged on the worst thing you ever did. And at the same time, when you do your time and you come out of prison, you're restricted from reintegrating into society. It's almost like we're begging these people to commit more crimes. Yeah. And it's insane to me. So that's kind of where my overview on what I think about the criminal justice system. I have a mentor. His name is Jay Holder, and he often tells me, it's not the criminal justice system, it's the legal system, right? We're not talking, it's not justice, it's just the legal system. Because it's a lot of parts of our justice system are not so just. Yeah, so that's my thing on that.
Do you have faith that it can be, like, if you're doing work within this area, it's not just mitigation work at some point, I assume it's also like actively, I mean, it's reforms in the name, right? Do you think reforming the legal system into a justice system is something that's feasible? like, are there countries that we can look to be like, they are getting close to that? Because I mean, the U.S. has the highest per capita rate of imprisonment of any
I think
modern
the
country,
last
right?
stat I said 25% of all the incarcerated in the world are in the United States of America, right? That might be a little old. It's definitely a little old, but 25% at any period in time. That's a lot of the incarcerated population.
Yeah.
But I see what you were saying about inroads to making the system better. I think it's possible. It would take amazing political will that, I think we'll discuss this later on. We just do not have the ability to muster with the current structure of our American political system. That's why, but that's in terms of criminal justice specifically, like people who are, doing, crimes, like violent crimes, but in particularly, in terms of antitrust.
Yeah.
So I want to be an antitrust lawyer because I feel that is where I can definitely make the most impact, because unfortunately in criminal justice it's kind of like a one case at a time type of thing. I shout out to the amazing public defenders out there, and they're doing their work, but it's super hard to scale that work. It's super hard. You're doing at a case at a time. Yeah. And you're not even getting the time to deal with that case with your full attention, because you're getting so much volume. And so what I really want to do is target antitrust, because there are millions, billions of dollars that can be gained and funneled back into supporting people at specifically children who are on the verge. Because I believe for men, the time where criminality is the highest is between roughly the ages of 16 to 35. That's like if you can prevent them from going down a criminal path during that time, that is a great time. So
you said 16, 25.
Yeah, 16, 35.
Oh, to 35. Okay.
I mean, and of course, as you get older, it drops off. So like, the criminality, the odds of criminality for somebody who's 21 versus 30, 21 is definitely more prone to commit crimes.
Yeah.
But after 35, it's basically like, okay, this person's not going to really be committing crimes like that.
Yeah. Does it change between like violent crime versus like white collar crime, for example? Because it seems like positions of, like, if we're looking at like wage theft, right? Even though we're not exactly usually sending a lot of people who are responsible for that to courts, usually it's settled. But like if we look at the I think Walgreens wage theft situation is like $2 to $3 billion like collectively stolen over a few years from like their workers. I doubt it was a 21 to like 35-year-old who was like in those positions.
Those are corporations.
Right? Yeah.
Remember, in America, corporations are people, and they are the eyes of the law. Yeah. Right. Which is that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other conversation. But
I wonder if I wonder if the corporation's older, if it's more likely to commit crimes. Otherwise, you're just springing up new ones.
McDonald's is just a super felon.
The average age of the felon is like 100.
150. That's something crazy. Which is another thing that I have a problem with, So the reason I'm really into antitrust laws, I look at the financialization of our economy. The financial industry controls everything. When they invest, that is basically an upvote or a downvote for where the economy will go. Whoever gets the capital to scale their business, that's the business that's going to eventually succeed and go on to make money.
Yeah.
And so controlling what the financial industry does and how they invest, I think is going to be super important in the downstream consequences it will have. That's why I want to be an SEC lawyer at some point. The financial industry, as we know it, so much of it operates in darkness, right?
Yeah.
And we have like dark pool trading. There's this excellent. Do you know the problem with Jon Stewart?
Yeah. Okay, I love the problem with Jon Stewart.
He had an excellent episode on it where he kind of talked to multiple SEC guys. He talked to Gary Gensler, for example, about how what the SEC does and what its role is. And in all of these conversations that he had, there's so much opaqueness in the system, and the stuff that is clear. Like, when there's a certain amount of quarterly reporting that is done to investors, even in that stuff, we're like, wait, that's legal? Is that supposed to happen? Like, I'm not sure that accounting trick that you did should be allowed.
Let alone like a foundation to a system.
Yeah.
Wait, so what type of accounting tricks are we talking about here?
People, there are ways to manipulate your earnings. So let's say like a quarter is not so hot. I think you can basically move over some of your losses into a earlier or later quarter to kind of disperse it depending on how you count what you did. You feel
Oh,
me?
yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's Zach, not Zach Welch. I'm forgetting his first name, but Welch. He was like the CEO of GE, right? And so GE back in the late 20th century, it was like powerhouse company, General Electric, right? And so this company always seemed to have sustainable quarter on quarter growth. It seemed very linear, like, because, the CEO didn't want everybody to get too excited and euphoric or too, down and depressed. Well, I was like, this kind of growth does not seem really appropriate. You know what I mean? They would say, oh, we sold this many cars in this quarter rather than that quarter. And, there's ways that you can manipulate your disclosures to your investors to, kind of make them invest in certain ways. And I'm like, yeah, that's not appropriate. I mean, I feel that any accounting, maneuvering that you can do should be significantly limited
and publicly like disclosed, right?
Publicly, it just shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't happen. It just period shouldn't.
That's fair.
Accounting trips should not happen in order to manipulate the markets. There's a lot of things you can do to manipulate the markets that we don't have any ways of stopping. It's crazy. So NASDAQ, for example, right? So NASDAQ, they started off as not a private company, as not kind of like not charging for their services. They're just an exchange. This is where stocks are traded. You give money to this guy, he invests in the company, gives me dividends. Simple, right? But later on, there are ways that NASDAQ could make money off of the exchange, right? Because it's like when you're moving money, there's always ways to make money off of the movement. You know what I'm saying? And so now we're seeing NASDAQ play such an important role in being almost a market maker. There's something...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's... There's so much... I don't even know where to go with this, right?
Yeah.
I feel that we need to figure out ways to make the stock market more accessible to the public and public oversight, because our financial industry is controlled by private entities, right?
Yeah.
NASDAQ is going to act in the ways that are profitable for NASDAQ, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to almost act as a company. But the thing is, if we have the exchange, like the foundational layer of where these transactions are happening, have its own profit incentive, that is going to spell bad news for the people who are not these giant corporations or some like large private equity, institutional money guys, right?
Yeah.
Because, NASDAQ, of course, they're going to cater to the people who have the most pools of money, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to care about, that Robin Hood guy who's just, trying to figure out like how to make a quick buck or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And, are you familiar with routing for order flow?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so basically, during the whole Robin Hood Wall Street Bets fiasco.
Yeah, good time. Good time.
It was good to, hey, man, I know a guy, he made $100 off of AMC. I was like, yo, go do your thing, man. During that whole fiasco, it was so apparent how people with institutional money and large amounts of capital were able to manipulate the market. Citadel, right? They were basically fulfilling the orders of Robin Hood investors. So Citadel is like the biggest market maker in the game, right? They are able to like sell it. They're able to transfer the stocks to the people who want to buy them.
Yeah.
And they were able to get the orders, right, of the Robin Hood investors, right? Based on the orders, they say, oh, there's a lot of demand for this stock right here. You know what we're going to do? We're going to buy a bunch of that stock before we fulfill these orders. And we're going to make a profit off of the spread. Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have a bunch of $10 orders coming for this stock right now. But that stock is at like $9.98. Let's buy that stock at $9.98.
Yeah.
They buy the stock. Then they fulfill the other orders that they already know is happening, right?
Yeah.
And once they fulfill those orders, that 2-cent spread, they pocket the difference because they sell the stocks that they bought at a cheaper price to the guys that they already know are buying it, right?
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
It's crazy stuff like that. And this is a Bernie Madoff made this system. Bernie Madoff, right?
Yeah.
Bernie Madoff made this thing happen. He's the one who made this type of routing for order flow thing, right? And it's just insane. How is that legal? How is that legal?
I want to propose how it's legal, right?
Go ahead.
There's legal political gambling, right? But there's also just straight up investments into specific political interests, whether it's donations directly to people's campaigns or other forms of lobbying, even a nice lunch out with some wine, right? You get someone who's charismatic, who knows a bit of psychology, you can persuade people of things, right? let alone if they're investing in your company. Have you seen the recent stats on the number of U.S. congressmen who are investing in defense, or not defense contractors, but like arms like manufacturers and stuff?
I haven't. Please
yeah.
inform me.
As soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, it was I think 14 or 16 U.S. senators. We're gonna have to check those facts, but a portion of U.S. senators and congresspeople bought a good deal of money in a myriad of different arms companies.
Okay.
And the thing is at the same time, people who are, supporting, the Ukrainian people's like fight for democracy and sort of self autonomy within a world full of big political nations, right? And powerful at that. These are the same Congress people who like came out and were like speaking really, really in favor of that fight, yet they were still trying to make a buck or two off of, or in this case, several thousands, off of that plight, off of that struggle, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is if that is happening within that small like domain, not to say that the Ukrainian conflict is small, because I think it's gearing up to be something that is transformative potentially in international relations. But so not to say that small, but within this specific microcosm of the larger system working, we recognize that people are going to probably work within their own, incentives or within their own power structures, and they'll probably fail to stand up to the call to action to work in favor of these transcendental almost like properties and values and ideas of like democracy, of fighting for the collective well-being of the people, not just the people who are likely to vote for you, these really, really large ideas that we kind of hope are the people in political office and those who are leaders can stand up and walk with, can like carry. I think that there's a lot of failure to bear that responsibility, to do good when you're in these offices, right? And I think that it connects to antitrust and all these areas. Like even if we just look at like investor disclosure laws, whereas like corporations being like legally obliged to like communicate to their investors like profits and losses each quarter, like those laws were set up by people who had special interests within those systems, So I think that I'm just like, this is obviously the most cynical take, and I'm not always the cynical, but I want to present that as, a larger picture of, it's people having dogs in the fight, running with it, and creating a foundation for them to keep making profit and making money, to maximize their own sort of like, well-being or whatever, whereas obviously it's at the deficit of empathy, right?
So we gotta go into this then. Yeah. So we need to figure out a way to flush this big money and the way that it influences our government officials out. Right? That's the fundamental thing, because I believe so, the capitalist, I'm a capitalist. I strongly believe in capitalism, definitely the best system that I believe we've created so far.
Yeah, it's pulled a lot of people up.
Yeah, exactly. Capitalism dope. But the way that we're doing it in America seems so backward and decrepit. It's insane how much influence these people have over every facet of our lives. Yeah. And so now we got to ideate. How are we going to get this money out, man?
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Yeah. Anytime there's a big issue, we can look to history to find some case studies, right? Okay. So we can look about the 20th century and
French Revolution.
French Revolution. There's a weird connection actually within that. Is I believe his name was John Law, but he was when stocks were first sort of initiated within economic systems in France especially. There's a man named John Law who was one of the proprietors of a company, a new form corporation in the early 1700s that had essentially had rights over Louisiana, and they went around spreading all these like really grand tales. It's called Louisiana Bubble, and all these grand tales about how beautiful Louisiana was, about how it was this land of opportunity and wealth and all these things. And they initially the stocks in this company were sold. I think it's Louisiana.
You need to get DuckDuckGo, man.
Oh, that's very fair. That's very fair.
Yeah. Okay, so I might be working for the company that shall not be named right now for the summer.
Oh yeah.
You know what? Hey, bro. leave it in there. Google. I like DuckDuckGo. We need to work on our privacy stuff. We'll collab on that. Make privacy stronger. There we go.
Okay, so I'm not finding the Louisiana bubble issues, but nonetheless, it was the first massive economic bubble and crash in history.
Okay.
Because John Law conveniently was spinning all these tales about how great Louisiana was. It was the first theorists because he were buying widespread stocks. I think it's the stats in October. The price of the Louisiana stock was like 500 Laprise.
Okay.
And then by I think Christmas it was around 5,000, and then by the new year I believe it was over 10,000. So by the end of that process, people were like selling everything they could just to get some of the stock because they were like, oh my god, we're just gonna keep making money, right? Yeah. And John Law also, contrary to his name, was also one of the main people who worked in the Bank of France. And then when the stocks started to crash significantly, his response was, oh, we'll just print money and try to stabilize the stock using the crown's money, and the government's money, and nearly bankrupted.
Sheesh.
The central bank of France.
Okay.
To the point where the monarchy was reeling from this economically for decades. And when the French Congress, I think it was the French Congress called, there was the special meeting where the French Revolution was kicked off, initiated. There are some scholars who argue that it's because of the massive financial burden that the monarchy was under at that time, that they had this group of people convene together in order to figure that out. Some decades later, because it had ruined the crown's money at that point.
Gotcha.
And this guy John Locke off completely scot-free. Didn't have any consequences. No consequences whatsoever. Yeah.
That is crazy.
If we're talking about
money makes the world goes round, man.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, it makes the world go round when you have political systems that are built by the same people of interest within that, right? So I think the solution is, to some degree, finding ways to increase mass mobilization of civic engagement.
Do you think politicians should be rich? Because sometimes I'm like, man, if we just gave these politicians $1 million, here's $1 million every year, you're set. Just don't talk to anybody. Don't talk to Goldman, dude. Don't talk to, shout out Goldman. I'm not hating, but let's be honest, you guys control a lot. It's just don't talk to any of these other cats. Just do your job, be civically engaged, and then retire. You know what I mean? And we tell them to do that.
Yeah.
That's what sometimes I'm thinking about. Poke holes in my idea.
Okay. I'm really in favor of a very similar idea that's mapped onto artificial general intelligence researchers who are not aligned at Google as well. Whereas one of the solutions is well, if we don't want people to make misaligned AI, why don't we just pay the people doing research to make safe AI several $100,000 more than the people doing research who are making $400,000 already at a place like DeepMind and stuff. So that is one solution there, and I feel like it is probably I feel like it's a potentially trackable solution. The only issue is I think wealth is a ladder that when you climb, you're always comparing yourself to the next rung up. Right? Do you know the Manhattan joke at Cornell is if you ask someone and they say they're from Manhattan, they then will say, "Oh, but I'm middle class though." And then you ask them what that means, and they say, "Well,
200K,
200K, not that much. My neighbors, and we're not like our neighbors. Our nneighbor, have 3 cars.
Yeah, they're $10 million a year. That's
exactly.
Not me. I only have 5. You know?
And then you go to that person, go to those people, and go, how where do you live? How much? And they're like, "Oh, Manhattan, but we're middle class. We're not, we're upper middle class." Yeah. We, it's, but we're not rich, because, our neighbors upstairs have a boat, have a yacht, and you go to that person and just the ladder just keeps going until it's literally the richest person, in Manhattan. Just, people are always comparing themselves to that, right? Unless if you're at the very top, in which case, your name is Jeff Bezos and you're a fucking weirdo. But, it's that ladder. So I think even if we gave politicians this money, it wouldn't, negate them unless there was legislation to stop them from doing so. But that's taxing on individual liberty.
I mean, to what extent should we expect our civil servants to act as normal every day. Say, like,
Plato
the military,
talks about this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but go on.
I'm saying we look at the military,
Yeah.
right? They're like the most civil servant of civil servant, right? They're putting their lives down on the line every day. And these guys, they got to be on a base. They got to wear the uniform. They got to have the haircut. Their liberties are being taken away for the greater good of the country. I'm like, hey, man, you're sending these guys out to fight. You know what I mean? If they can do it, you can do something too. You know what I mean? You do not need to, go to your wine club in Bethesda, Maryland. You know what I mean? It's unnecessary. Like, you know what I mean?
Shout to Maryland.
Shout out to Maryland. Shout out to DMZ, Paul George, PG County, stand up. I got some homeboys out there. You know who you are. Good up. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, we ask people to make sacrifices for our government all the time.
Yeah.
Why can't we ask our politicians to do it? Nancy Pelosi, she said something, the Stock Act basically requiring disclosure of So there's the Stock Act. It basically says, if you're in Congress, you got to disclose what you're buying and selling and trading and whatnot. Yeah. However, it doesn't take into account family. I believe it takes into account immediate family, doesn't take into account, second, your aunts or something like that. So I feel like you can circumvent that law in a myriad of ways, but it has good intentions to stop, Congress people from trading based on insider information that they have. Yeah. Right.
Also, I'm gonna move the mic real quick so
sure.
Because I keep bumping this and I don't want it to be. Okay. I'm just gonna throw this on. Sorry. And then let's see if we can just throw this on. But keep talking.
Sure. So, the Stock Act that Nancy Pelosi commented on, she said, we just want to participate in the free market. You know what I mean? That's why Congress people should be allowed to, buy whatever they want and engage in the market as normal. I'm like, no. No. You are not a normal person when you take on the office of Congresswoman, Congressperson, whatever. Yeah. You are making decisions for the country. It's a sacrifice, you know what I mean? Yeah. Generationally, or not, I feel like in this era in American society, the idea of sacrifice is not as, valued as much. Yeah. You gotta give some things up. You have to make decisions. You have to make choices. You're not gonna have endless optionality to pursue whatever you want. Yeah. You're going to have to forego some things in order to achieve greater goals. Yeah. And I think we need to make that codified into law for our politicians. Yeah. We cannot. I don't think you should be trading if you're a politician. Yeah. You should not be trading stocks. You should. Yeah. I think you can buy and hold SYP 500. That's what you should do. You can get the Russell 3000. You can get the Russell 2000. Buy and hold it. That's what you're doing. If after you're a congressperson, okay, fine, go crazy. Do what you want. But while you're in Congress, no. It seems, especially because we have a career politician people stay in Congress for a long time typically. Yeah. Or not typically, but the ones that are high profile, they are.
Which we need to talk about later as well in relation to technology and politics.
Oh, for sure. That congressional hearing with Google, Facebook, Amazon.
Bro, what's a Finsta? What's a Finsta? That's terrible. God, that fucking killed me. Do you see the clip?
No, I've seen all the. But I watched the hearing. That was popcorn moment. Oh my god!
Next time there's one of those foundational hearings, we should do a 21st Talks live event where you and I just stream them and watch them together. Okay. And just talk about it as it's happening. Okay. Because imagine if that's the only way that we could get people to listen to an otherwise probably kind of boring, but massively significant. Because if we just sit there, just what the fuck? They just ask that question. So yeah, we should do that as
we gotta contact C-SPAN. Say, hey, C-SPAN Plus. You know, I mean,
yes, 21st Talks. We can be the announcers. We can be
And in this corner, at age 60 years old, Nancy Pelosi doesn't know what a Finsta is. You know that. I think that could be pretty cool.
Then we can just have someone list off all the financial interests that the person has. And then just
oh man, that'd be great. Yeah, we need to make sure that our politicians sacrifice. That's a fundamental thing I run on. But by the way, if I talk too much, man,
that's why you're here is to spit some ideas.
Got you. Yeah, guys, the people listening to this, hi, how you doing? Thank you so much for being with us. If you're like, man, this guy rambles, tell my guy Coleman over here. You know, I mean, I'll be better next time, I promise.
No. This is good. This is really good so far. And that there's always in the back of my head, there's always podcasters like tech curse is in the back of my head. I'm like, is the sound good? Is everything working? Great. So but even despite that, your fluidity with these ideas is cutting through that. And I appreciate it. I appreciate coming on.
My pleasure.
So yes, we can like have different ways to make sure politicians are sacrificing more. Do you see that being more like idea based? Is that a socially propagated idea that we get people to hold their politicians accountable to, or do we try to build that into the incentive structures of being someone in one of these hierarchies, right? Because I think the Batson studies in moral psychology show that like it's ideas do not affect behavior as much as we tend to think they do. The Good Samaritan studies is the other name. Are you familiar?
No.
So Good Samaritan studies is they essentially had some researchers got a group of college students together at different universities, and they had these undergrads either learn a sermon that was like the Good Samaritan sermon from I forget which book in the Bible, and then the other group.
There are multiple. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hell yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. That's good. That's good to hear in that case. So they gave a Good Samaritan, like they understood it. They had to give the speech like that, all that stuff. And then the other group had something completely unrelated, right? And then both groups were then told to go to another place on campus, and were split up into two further subgroups. One was given 5 minutes to walk to the place they needed to do. The other one was given significantly more time. The place was approximately a 10-minute walk away.
Okay.
So if you were going to be Russian, and like the researchers were like, you have to be there on time, like all this stuff, right? And what they found was regardless of if the person had read the Good Samaritan, which is about literally being Good Samaritan, or whatever the control like reading was, it did not change the likelihood of them stopping to help someone who was, a staged person who like needed help on the walk, right?
Copy.
So the ideas didn't change behavior. What did change behavior though was if they had enough time to stop and not feel like they were going to get in trouble to some degree. And then other people read it as like, if the researcher is more or less stern in some of the replicated studies, if the researcher's like, you have like 10 minutes, but like, take your time. It doesn't matter if you're late. Those who are also more likely to act, right?
Gotcha.
Acting good and stop, right? But even still, regardless of if they had read the Good Samaritan thing or not, right? So literally engaging in ideas about being a Good Samaritan doesn't necessarily make you more apt. But what you can do is you can take those ideas and say, I want to be a Good Samaritan, or in this case, I want to be a good person. I want to, be an effective altruist. I want to be someone who goes back to the world and is able to like fight for human flourishing, right? You can take that, and those ideas, I would argue, probably do shift behavior to some degree, right? However, you have to take that and consciously go, how can we build this into our systems? How can we build this into our institutions to build incentive structures that allow us the space, right? There's a reason why when the sayings, I know my I have a close family member who spent a good deal of time in prison, and I remember one thing that I've like talked with him extensively about is this idea of like some portion of the incarcerated party or body of the United States is are people who didn't have a second and a half to think about what they're about to do, right? That like quick breath, that like quick like thought, and that's not a failure on them. That's not a failure on them whatsoever. I'm saying that's a failure on the societal institutions that we have, the societal conditions that we have that cause this like knee-jerk reaction to things around us, right? And that's one of the reasons why.
Wait, sorry.
You disagree? Yeah.
I disagree a little bit about it's not the individual. So let me clarify what you're saying before I disagree. So you're saying that the quick reaction of somebody to stimuli is the fault of our institutions.
We're not conditioned to have that second to mindfully respond to it, right?
Oh, so you're saying like American society is quick instant gratification, like kind of like based on then
also we also know within communities, right, where it's like act or like die. It also creates conditions. Oh, that's fee. That also creates conditions under which you are likely to over time just respond to things, right? And it's I'm not familiar with how like poverty and crime in area affects like psychology of individuals, but if you are getting anxious around someone, you're more likely to act quickly, either to flee or stay, right?
I understand what you're saying now.
And that's one of the reasons why I think and this is again something I really want to hear your point on in the case of like prison reform is we can have these education programs for individuals, and We can like there's certain like breathing techniques. Meditation has been shown really to be really effective in terms of its ability to like allow people that like quick second to change, right? That quick second to go, okay, what am I going to do? And that can be really powerful to create better action, better behavior. In fact, there's a person in the 80s or 70s, a Russian commander who or a Soviet commander who should have responded to what turned out to be a computer blip on a Russian like system. He should have responded by shooting nukes at the U.S. And he didn't. He took a couple minutes and thought about it, and then didn't. He could have been executed for it, right? So we know that having distance from a decision makes for more ethical decisions a lot of the time. Marcus Aurelius
100%.
talks about that. Seneca talks about that.
Yes.
Absolutely. And God, I'm so glad we're friends. I'm so happy that you're a fan of meditations. So we know that we can have those types of behavioral changes that are, you know, within the individual going, I wanted to learn these things and be exposed to the ideas from like educators and mentors and all that, right? We definitely need to do that. But in terms of institutional changes, how do you weigh those two different paths to making a better world?
Got you. So I would say we need to figure out. Now, I'm going to make this specific to like stocks in the financial industry because I think just being specific is helpful. One, I think we need a more social pressure on this because if people prioritize financial transparency and not like saying, hey, I'm not going to trade stocks and I want you to vote for me because I'm not trading stocks while I'm in office, and people are like, yeah, that's my guy. I feel like that's going to go such a long way because, you know, politics to a certain extent is like a popularity contest, right?
Yeah.
And so if people are saying, hey, I cannot vote for somebody if they're trading while they're in office. Like if there's a senator right now who stands up, right, and says, hey, I am only holding the SYP 500. I'm only holding indexes. I'm not investing in any sectors or specific stocks. And I'm not going to sell or do anything with my holdings until I'm out of office. And everybody's like, heck yeah, we really like that. I feel that's going to go such a long way to kind of peer pressuring the rest of Congress to be like, man, if I really want to like show my people that I'm about something, I got to, you know, disclose actively that I'm not trading stocks. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Secondly, it's legislation, because legislation is ultimately how the rules are made in our society. But the legislators right now, I don't think they're making a bunch of money off of, you know, financializing away and, you know, doing some insider trading. Or not insider trading necessarily, but using information that they have to inform better decisions for them. I'm not going to explain that right now. It's a whole thing. But the fundamental thing I'm trying to say is that there's not enough social pressure for politicians to not do anything in terms of trading. That's the first step. The legislation will follow, because I forgot, I think it was Jordan Peterson. He said that. He said like maybe Ben Shapiro. I think it was Ben Shapiro actually. Like politics is downstream of like theology and God, right? Like our society is downstream of God and our like whatever we think the highest being or highest good is, right? So it all comes down to that. And so if it is a core fundamental value for American society to say that, hey, we demand this level of transparency, the society is sufficiently suffused with that. Downstream of the society, our politics is what is created. Then our politics will reflect that value, right? Because ultimately politics is about values. And so that's how I think social pressure is the main thing, because the legislation is just not going to work because the legislators are profiting too much off of it.
I think the goal of that social pressure has to be, and let me know what you think of this pushback, is I think the goal of that social pressure has to be to change institutions in order to embed that social tendency like within the system. And we can look to places, for example, one reading of the Fall of Rome, the Roman Republic that is that there were all of these social tendencies within the Roman like ruling class that were unspoken to some degree, but social rules. They were social rules. They weren't written down. They weren't like cut into a constitution. They weren't any of those things. They were social norms that you adhered by. And as we saw with, I think it was after the Marius reforms, it was, one of my favorite politicians in human history is this man named Gaius Marius. Marius, I believe Marius was the first Roman politician to be like have like violence done onto him by other senators. And that broke this social tendency. It broke this uncodified, but yet like socially codified, right? This unwritten rule of that was fundamental to their process, right? And I think the U.S. started off as a country of revolution, and when you have countries of revolution, you have enough experience within the people who are going to be those leaders, right? To have a standardized set of unspoken codified rules that you don't always feel like you have to write down because they're so embedded in
the theology and the
exactly. However, countries change. And that's why one of the reasons why countries, one of the people we recently had on the podcast is, studies like societal downfall over time, and adheres to this idea of the average like society lasts around a little over 300 years, around 300 years, right? Historically, and it's probably because.
Where do you think we are in that as American society?
Oh man, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh man, people might not like me for this one, but
do you think we're on the down and out?
Oh man, 100%.
We're so big as a country.
We are like it's clear that we, economically speaking, in terms of the the distribution of wealth, like the golden age, like post-war till 1970s when inflation's just decided to get us. That was like economically one of the most egalitarian times, or maybe the most egalitarian time economically in American history. Yeah. And so
what years about are you
post-war? So that's like so basically 1950s and 60s. Yeah. Like those were pretty good times for us, right? And so when you look at what we were enjoying then in terms of economic inequality, it's so amazing to see like the lack of gap between the top and the bottom. I feel that at the same time, the society has changed. That aside from like wealth, the society has changed because we used to be very much more religious. When we were much more religious as a country, we seem to have much more guiding principles because, you look at the European countries that are small, homogenous, there's a reason that they kind of create systems that, we look in America and say, oh, that Nordic model is pretty cool. Right? It works because they're small, homogenous. They have a pretty common culture, right? It's harder for us to hear because we're so heterogeneous. The strength of America is in its diversity. We are the mosaic of the world. Everybody's here. Everybody, which is so dope. At the same time, it's hard to kind of have that common alignment, right? Yeah. And I think that since we don't have that common alignment, we're kind of pulling at each other apart in different directions, trying to figure out still where we're going to go to all together. But I think it's going to smooth itself out. You know what I mean? Because back in the days, the Anglophones where it came here, they were the party that kind of settled, the British specifically. The Irish came, everybody was, let's say, F the Irish. We don't like those guys. There's a lot of racism towards the Irish people, But eventually, they smoothed that. They basically integrated it now. Like, same thing with the Italians. They came nobody liked Italians, but now they're just here, right? Yeah. I look in recent times, I look at the success of the Chinese Americans, right? I think they're doing extremely well. And the Indian Americans here, some of the highest earning ethnicities in the country. And it's amazing to see how they're integrating into American society.
Is that rated per capita or is it rated in like economic growth per capita or something?
Oh, per person, they make the most. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the Indians are up there. The Chinese are up there. I'm trying to think if the Nigerians are up there. I know we're the most educated ethnicity per capita. Like Nigerians, we get like the education. Shout out my Niger people, you feel me? And Omo Niger, but
we need to get more like Nigerians on the podcast at some point. I think. I want to get like one of my scholars is episode 11. I think is with like an African philosopher who does work in Chicago. Okay. And I think she's Nigerian. I'm so sorry, Nadidi, if I'm getting that wrong. But we talked about like justice, economics. I believe her PhD work was in like applying like economic models from Germany to like African countries for like economic reform. Got you. Fascinating shit. Okay. Fascinating ethics.
I realize we're like ping ponging everywhere. Yeah. The question that you were asking is if we're on the decline, correct? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me hone in on that because I'm just going right. Yeah. The reasons America are on the decline is one, we have a lot of heterogeneous ideas and theories about how this country should go, and we are declining in that regard. Okay. Two, it is clear that the people who control the most money have control over everything in our society. To a certain extent, that's always been, but in the past times it was because I'm an aristocrat by my blood. I have this ability to rule, and so I have this ability to rule, therefore I get the wealth. Now it's like I have the wealth, therefore I have the ability to rule.
You see what I'm saying?
And I think that's a problem, because they're just becoming so far away from what the common person is experiencing. They're also trying to throw distractions as to like why why the suffering of the people who are average in this country is not the real struggle. Like I said, identity politics. Like Black people, like, we've been experiencing racism forever. And of course racism sucks, right? But we are not making money. Black people in America consistently are the lowest socioeconomically on the totem pole. We need this bread in our pockets. And of course, having diversity, inclusion programs and all these things is cool. But we need that bread. That's what my people need, right? And so that's super important. And so we have the people. So like I said, we have a lot of competing ideologies. We have a leadership class that is rich, does not understand the average person. And at the same time, it seems that our hyper individualism might be our undoing. There's no sense of collective in America. We do not have this, like, a lot of people I realize are becoming disenchanted with the idea of like being American, especially in like metropolitan areas. Of course, people who are more conservative leaning and definitely more middle America, they're like, hoorah, America.
But even still, there's a being in favor of being an American, like, patriot is going out the window.
Yes, and which is terrible. It's terrible.
I mean, we're at a place where last year, not to be, not to like constantly bring up like January 6th, but those are people who consider themselves patriots who are actively like fighting against the fundamental like fabric of American legislation.
Exactly.
And that was them thinking they were doing that. So the idea of of being an American, of being, even for people who are in favor of that idea has warped so much and has changed so much. It has effectively negated what it used to be. So it's like, even that, I think that's that changing shift in identity of what it means to be an American is something that I think we have to take control back over, right? And we have to like build a new idea together, because collective identity is one of the best aspects of human beings, right? Studying moral psychology here, we have the best moral psychology program probably in the world right now at Cornell. And from taking these classes, when I am not postponing doing work by doing podcast episodes.
So this is just procrastination.
This is just procrastination.
Yeah, not even a good combo. Just I got you.
The number of times I would miss a reading and go, well, during this podcast interview the other day with an expert.
Okay.
But we recognize that collective identity is a really powerful way to get people to truly work in favor of each other. The late recently passed away actually scholar, I think it's is it Edward O. Wilson from Harvard. He identifies that there's like 3 different types of mammals. Some scholars argue that there's only 2 species of mammals that are something called eusocial, and those are social animals that act in favor of other members of their species that are not their kin. And then like we do that together. We've had religious stories to allow us to do that. Those religious stories encompassed everything. 3,000 years ago, when you were participating in a religious tradition, if it was at a stone monolith or what have you during a festival or whatever, that was the political economic life. That was your social life. That was, everything was under this umbrella. A lot of things, at least from recent archaeological work, was under this umbrella of religious stories, right? Because religious stories are fucking potent, right? And we have to find these new stories for the 21st century going forward. And I think that's kind of the core of what 21st Talks is aimed at, is that's where we find the solution, is finding better, more effective stories. And I believe that it's based off of effective altruism and doing good ethical work and fighting against these big issues. But maybe that's just the rallying cry of a generation of people who have seen all the other, traditional approaches to meaning kind of get snuffed out over the last 150 years. So do you think that is a part of why the U.S. is on the decline, is that death of meaning?
Definitely. You know, Nietzsche has never rung out so true.
Yes, man. Yeah.
People are trying to figure out what their meaning is in a way that has never been, or at least in the American context, has never been necessary, because we had religion and we had patriotism at such high and strong levels. People, I feel like, especially in our generation, I feel like people are increasingly depressed, dealing with mental health issues and all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like we have a tough time finding our place in the world. And at the same time, it's so easy to see what other people are doing. So it's as if everybody knows what they're doing. We don't know what we're doing, and we're meaningless. It's just like, that's a terrible combination to be in.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's why I like, of course I'm a Christian, because I believe in theology and Jesus Christ and the resurrection and all that, and, the fundamental gospel truths. Yeah. But at the same time, it's such a great centering mechanism, and it allows you to think about the world outside of yourself, and rather God working through you in the world. Yeah. And so it kind of takes the pressure off of you almost, in a way. Like, you know what? Hey, I'm just trying to follow what the good book tell me, and we'll figure it out at the end of the day.
I think that's I think you're not giving yourself enough credit there. I think it's in some way taking up another an even heavier weight to carry sometimes within the
in many ways.
Yeah.
But there's a passage in the Bible, if Jesus Christ says, it's loosely paraphrased, but like, take on my burden, and my yoke is easy, my burden is light. When you take on the burden of so to speak, of Christ, of living as a child of God, he makes it easy for you. He's gonna lift you up. I find I feel empowered in my faith at the end of the day. So whatever rules or restrictions that people make it out to be, it's not really hampering me down. It's just like, in order to, it's like, okay, this is not the best example, but it's like the way that cocaine feels, not that it's bad, not that you should do it or anything like that, but like the high and ecstasy, the euphoria that you get, right? Yeah. You're gonna have to feel bad at some point while doing it, right? Yeah. Like, I'm getting that euphoria, that high, while doing something good for me that's giving me meaning and purpose at the same time, right? Yeah. So it's like, man,
there's no hangover.
There's no hangover. There's no downside. It's all pure. You know what I mean?
Do you think
it's all good?
I think within some cases there is an epistemic hangover that can cause ramifications. This podcast,
epistemic. You like using these big words. I use big words, but that one, say that again.
Epistemic, study of knowledge.
Okay.
The roots of knowledge, right? And heuristics are general tools to allow us to get knowledge and to justify our knowledge, right? Is the right way to put that. But there is a hangover of religion that I think parts of the U.S. are experiencing collectively, right?
Absolutely.
Both on the reasons why it died away, but at the same time, like, Nietzsche was diagnosing people of religion dying away, and when he made the really infamous passage where he was saying there will be wars of national identity that are unlike any mechanized warfare we've ever seen before. I guess he didn't say mechanized, but he's like he kind of called he kind of guessed World War II was going to happen.
Okay, gotcha.
And what a fucking flex for a man who is probably going syphilitic. Or as Carl Jung would argue, went too deep into his own psychology and went insane because of that. But nonetheless, we have this sort of dual side aspect of religion interfacing with public and social life and how it's affected institutions that have been laid. And I want to ask you about secularism within the U.S. Because we're getting to a point now where it is fantastic to see how many politicians are being elected who are the number of Muslim politicians. It's still nowhere near enough. I don't know if it's representational to per capita of Americans who are Muslim. But I doubt religions across the board are exactly represented within Congress apart from Christianity. Because what was it, JFK was the first
Protestant.
Yeah, the first non-Protestant president, which is insane, right? He was Catholic, and at that time that was can't do that, man. I can't do that. No, I can't do that. So if JFK a rich white man was, on people were on the fence about electing him because he was a different sect of Christianity, then fucking hell, the fact that we're now at a point where we're starting to get people from a more diverse set of different religious backgrounds, I think that's really, really powerful. But coming to grips with that within the context of Christianity being, having been sort of a foundational aspect of how the American system was like built initially, which you might push back against, and if so, please do. I don't know how we make sense of it being secular in today's like world, right? Because we want to push for these religious like folks being within political offices, because it's
secularism
critical.
is not normal.
Yeah,
I think people have to realize that first and foremost. Like, there's this very big push for secularism by these international organizations and whatnot. But we have to realize that is not how we're built. Yeah, the French, they love secularism, right? That is not how humans are made. We're made to be religious. We're made to be spiritual. That is our fundamental core programming, and that is what has allowed us to adapt and survive the psychological test of nature coming at us all the time, right? Because with our intelligence, of course, it gives us the ability to adapt and overcome, but it allows us to think, interpret pain more, reflect deeper on ourselves. And so the religion has served an amazing role in helping us with that. So first, acknowledge secularism is not normal. Second, how are you going to teach secularism? If we want secular thought to be how we orchestrate the world, how are we going to teach it? And right now, I think there's a big push saying, religion is just goofy, Christianity, you talking about some dude coming from the dead, okay, Casper the Ghost, that's how people kind of dismiss religion. And that's what I think what Jordan Peterson did with his kind of explaining the Bible and gospel.
Powerful stuff.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Because he made it applicable to people who are non-religious. Of course, I fundamentally believe in what what the Bible says, but he's talking about it in a way that's applicable to, people who are non-secular. And we need to figure out a way, because secularism is just so empty. It's almost like trying to become the most efficient. It's like you're making art efficiently, but art is not about efficiency. It's about the beauty and expression, right? And so teaching secularism in a way that is, for lack of a better word, sexy. That's what needs to happen, because you're not going to tell people, secularism is kind of telling people, hey, we just need to maximize utility, right? Kind of utilitarian in thought, right? And by doing that, everybody's going to do their own thing. There's no higher power. There's no framework for meaning. You're just going to, try to maximize utility and be cool with the unimportant lifespan that you have on this planet.
Your own significance.
Yeah, your own.
And so you're saying secularism is impotent in its ability to meet the deeper psychological needs of people? Yeah. Because I think a lot of liberalism was national identity within the 20th century was a goal to find meaning within sort of a more secular state when people were still having dual stories, right? But even still, we saw a lot of political reforms that were the things that we flex as the things that were good in the 60s, for example, with the civil rights movement. Those people were largely religious leaders, with the exception of Bayard Rustin, the gay socialist, who is I love that man with my entire heart. But with the exception of Bayard, it's most of the civil rights activists were coming from religious communities, and that's because those were the communities that had the civic engagement. They had more relative wealth compared to other communities organized around other things.
There was purpose in that,
and there was purpose, and that's the thing is purpose can overcome deficits of material, which is essential to change political systems, because purpose allows you to dig in deep. As Viktor Frankl. The spirit of this podcast is Viktor Frankl in so many ways. As he identifies when he's speaking to a group of undergrads, 11 months after he was released from a Nazi death camp with his entire family killed, right? With the exception of his mom, but his approach to meaning had been completely destroyed. Actually, it hadn't been. That's the thing, is he had sat down and said, what is my meaning, when all these ways that I had taken up meaning in finding in my own life, when those are stripped from me because of the Nazi death machine, where do I reserve my own meaning? Where do I draw that line, take control of that? And in some ways it was the fight for meaning, and then the ideas that he found through that fight while being in a psychologist within a death camp as a prisoner. His fight for meaning and to build it into other people psychologically, and propagate those ideas, that then became his meaning as well, right? So I think stories of meaning is the way to make secularism sexy, right? And that's spiritual. It's I mean, at least it's pseudo-spiritual. And I would argue it is spiritual as someone who deeply values spiritualism, but, is also, firmly agnostic. And I think that you can find that meaning in doing good, but political systems have to be aimed at doing that good. And right now, they aren't, is the issue. So we need a unified story. We need a unified theory that everyone can lean into, regardless of political background or economic background, that creates a standardized story for people to go, this is what I'm fighting for. What are you fighting for? How is your story a little bit different than mine? Let's figure out together.
Defining good.
Yeah.
Defining good. So, some people, might think good is, excluding black people and wearing white hoodies all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's codifying systems that are meant for achieving good, I think, is a dangerous place to be at.
That's a good, that's the critique of EA. And I think we should tackle that, because I think that's the biggest ethical political interface question that I'm at a loss for right now. So I would love to hear potential avenues.
People need to do good. People ought to pursue their good. And I believe some person's good. Somebody with the hoodie on or with the white hoodie on, and
they shouldn't pursue their sense of good.
But let me say.
Okay.
Yes, they should.
Okay.
Okay. So they're gonna pursue their sense of good, right?
Yeah.
I hate their sense of good. I think their sense of good is detestable.
Yeah.
However, if we live in a place, I come from this place that man is both good and evil, right? Kind of like Adam and Eve in the garden, right?
Yeah.
We have both knowledge of good and evil.
It's one of the essential ideas of Christianity.
Yeah, it's very
religion
fundamental.
across the board.
Yes. Yeah. And so I truly believe people on the net are going to try to do good, right? And sometimes your good is going to be negating somebody else's sense of good. That's truly wickedness, right? And the thing is, we cannot have, the worst thing is to have people consciously trying to pursue evil. Like, for example, if somebody who's a Klan member, right, and they're like, I want to keep black people out of my, community, and I don't like them, and that's their sense of good because they're protecting their culture or whatever, right? Okay, fine, go and do that. But if that is their sense of good, right, and the vast majority of people are like, hey, that sense of good is ridiculous, right? The vast majority of people are going to overrule that one person, right? Because you cannot survive as a person thinking you're doing evil, right? It's just not going to work, right? Because that's just insanity, right? Truly, that's insanity. And so, especially if somebody who's has a terrible idea and they have a sense of good that is I fundamentally disagree with and is wicked, and then they're acting opposite to what they believe is good.
Yeah.
That means they're going insane. So if somebody has a sense of good that is evil and they're going insane, hell no, right? Because whatever they're gonna do is just crazy.
But that craziness can kill 20 kids in an elementary school, and people having that happen to them, that withdrawal into life de-affirming ideas, right?
Wait, how did you get to that logically? I'm sorry.
Not the case of the nihilistic lone wolf terrorist in today's world, right? And with just certain firearms alone in the United States, that's enough to there's an idea called the democratization of destruction and existential risk that the scholar Bostrom presented. And essentially, it's this idea that as technology increases, the ability for one individual to cause widespread havoc unduly onto other people goes up, right? And that is a fact, right? And you can see this in terms of and this is where certain bio-risk communication issues get really tricky, and it's hard to navigate as a communicator in existential risk. But imagine if you could make a nuclear bomb from your dorm room, right?
Yeah.
So one person having a shitty idea and ideology, and oftentimes it's young men right?
Very much so, yeah.
And I know Jordan Peterson writes about this. That life de-affirming idea and ideology of like nihilism, right? They read the first 5 pages of Nietzsche and don't go deeper into it, right? That's the fucking issue. Keep fucking reading and you'll realize Nietzsche was trying to find something beyond that. Life de-affirming ideologies do take hold of people's psychologies, and that leads to people doing things that are such a twisted, maniacal form of like them doing something in a universe where they don't even think good and bad are real, right? So that is how they can justify. That's how they can be wicked to the highest degree, right? Even if those people make up like a very, very small percentage, as we go in the 21st century, we have to find a way to deal with that problem, right? Because it's not just going to be people, killing 20 people, which is already a fucking tragedy on a scale that is a collective trauma to society at times. But it will be people potentially taking out cities, right?
Yeah.
And
democracy
can't
smart
survive.
enough to realize that there's no way that an individual is going to have the ability. We're going to allow an individual to have the ability to destroy that much people.
I fundamentally disagree with that point.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel
technologically.
that I absolutely agree that the technology will be out there, that we will have the ability for one person to just wake up and be like, hey, I want to massacre 1,000 people. However, I don't think our government is going to allow that. Unless we have significant like government breakdown, which we might actually have that. But I don't think that's possible. I really don't think that's possible. It seems so. Everybody, the whole like mutually insured destruction, right? If you launch a nuke at me, I'm gonna launch a nuke at you. The whole world is gonna be destroyed, right? And so let's say if everybody knows that there's like certain levels of depravity, right?
Yeah.
That people reach, that some people interpret as their good, right?
Yeah, or the negation of good. There's some people who don't care about good. And that's the thing is
well, I'm trying to act in my framework for a second.
Jump for it.
Because your framework is encountering mine, and I'm trying to like.
God, you are so fucking smart, man.
Got you.
My God. Okay, please keep going.
Got you.
Yeah.
So, like in my framework, I see like there's like good. Everybody has their sense of good. Everybody has their sense of evil, and people should always work towards their sense of good, because if you're working to your sense of evil, you're insane.
Yeah.
Right. And so if somebody is working towards their sense of good, which is actually wicked, like destroying a whole bunch of people, the people who are good in acting towards their good are going to be like, hey, that person who has that good that is trying to destroy everybody is going to be like, no, we can't have that person. Let's put like steps to make sure that the person can't get the certain amount of resources, the certain technology that they need. It might exist, but we're going to prevent them from having it. I think it's very similar to how we strongly regulate the arms trade. There's some, we can't get flamethrowers, we can't get like proper like military grade flamethrowers. There's a lot of stuff that we can't get in America. We can get AR-15s, that's interesting, but there we can't get tanks, we can't get, freaking ICBMs, and the argument counterpoint to that automatically is like, oh, well, we just haven't hit the scales of economy where people can easily get that. But even then, when you look at, let's say like miniguns, for example. People, if you have enough money, like it's gonna cost you a couple $1,000, but you can get a minigun. Shooting out repetitive rounds, like hundreds of rounds, very fast.
Yeah.
The thing is, we just don't have that widely accessible because we have restrictions and laws against it, right?
So you have confidence in the context of advanced technologies that could democratize destruction. You have confidence that laws and regulations will be able to restrict those, and that is an argument that's in line with the sort of cynical case of politics that we were presenting earlier. In line with politicians making decisions and calls that are within their best interests, oftentimes first and foremost, which is not the case across the board. If any politicians listening, please come on. I'll be very nice to you, I promise. And Emmanuel co-host for those episodes, and also be nice. But yeah, so I think that like it would make sense if there is an incentive for those politicians to. However, to bring back to something that was said to emerge at some point in the discussion a little bit earlier. Our politicians are like old, like they like it's not
That's
just
true,
age.
yeah.
It's not just age, but it's like literally the fucking C-SPAN clip of the senator being like, "What's a finsta?"
Yeah.
I can't get it out of my head. What's a finsta? Imagine what's a cyberspace or what's a nuke? Like it's like. Luckily, we don't have that issue with nuclear weapons. But even still, like look at Donald Trump being like much more willing to go towards the nuclear option than any president in the past. It's because he didn't fucking understand the technology. There's a lot of cases that Eisenhower, as a person within government, was very instrumental in making sure that nuclear bombs weren't used because he was familiar enough with the
underrated
nuclear
president.
Yeah, sorry.
He's an underrated president.
Wait, yeah. I mean,
underrated.
he was a piece of shit in many ways. He also made sure we didn't fucking great on history on a curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like absolutely, you know. But it's because he was familiar. He's able to push back against generals.
Yeah.
That were like he had generals who were like very in favor of using the nuclear option. So the case is when we have technology, I think legislation fails when technology is not educated enough, which is one of the reasons I want to do this podcast and want to do the policy and political communication work I want to do. Is good journalism might inform politicians this century about dangerous technology in a way that like can allow us to actually have faith in our laws and our ability to restrict that behavior, right?
But
and I think that's the recipe. That's the recipe.
I see what you're saying, but the politicians, well, the press wants to be to power and proximity to power because they're gonna get the great breaking stories, especially like the mainstream press. You know what I mean? There's not
legacy.
Yeah, the legacy media.
Yeah, I love that term.
They wanna just listen to what the insider knowledge coming from the Pentagon or from the White House, and then say I have the inside scoop on what the people in power are saying. They're not trying to like be like, oh, so you're talking about making a no-fly zone over Ukraine. What exactly are the implications of that? You know what I mean? I think it was like, I don't know, MSNBC or something. There was like talking to Blinken. He's our Secretary of State, right? And Anthony Blinken, right? Yeah. And I think the reporter, he was basically asking, why are you ruling out a no-fly zone? Like, why can't we have a no-fly zone over Ukraine, right? I was like, a no-fly zone is like guaranteed direct conflict with Russia, right? Because it basically means you're shooting down Russian planes in that zone, right? No-fly zone, right? And so that's definitely straight conflict. So we're gonna have like two nuclear powers coming at each other, right? In a direct conflict, and that guy basically asks like, why are you not for that, basically, or ruling that option out? And I'm like, wow, that is a question that is coming straight from like the CIA or the Pentagon or something like that. Like, why are we not It's like there's such a clear collusion between like the mainstream media and the legacy media and kind of like these insider information conduits. You feel me? There seems to be some kind of like joy that is gleaned by the legacy media from getting like direct access to the people in power. But what that facilitates is that the people in power dictate what should be a part of the ether and the kind of mental consciousness of the American people. And that is really detrimental because you're getting voices that are very fringe and elite. So quote unquote elite, not intellectually elite, but just, run stuff in the country. And I think that is really dangerous because the press is needed to disseminate information to the rest of us, and they're doing the information of the people on the inside who have the control. That's what I'm seeing, and it's really crazy.
I think group sourced idea vetting, or is that group sourced journalism isn't the right term, because that obviously is open to what we were talking about last night in relation to clicks, the attention economy, right? Yeah. And you wonderfully said, like I believe to paraphrase, you said. The attention economy is based off just more attention is good within the framework, right? Not actually ethically good, but it's advantageous within the framework itself. And because of that
capitalist system of monetization, the more clicks you get, the better. Yeah.
So, but we're talking about the attention of the the general public when we talk about that generally. When it comes to people who have differential abilities to make decisions, right? I'm really, really curious about building coalitions with people who are in positions of power, and of course, like occupying positions of power and supporting people who I think are able to do real good in the world around us, right? And this is something that we've talked about in relation to specific like political goals and stuff. But regardless of who is in office, the question is, how do politicians get their information? How do people in power get their information? What are they checking the New York Times? Are they reading Medicalists and other sort of like forecasting sites? Probably not the latter, right?
Yeah.
And as we know, when we don't normally we don't have a president who like sees something on Fox News and tries to pass a law about it or talks about it publicly a few hours later.
Mm.
But so I'm curious, like how do you think people in positions of power ought to get their information for the most ethical good? Because I think talking to people is probably a pretty fucking reliable way.
That is
not epistemically.
It's just not scalable because you can't talk to everybody.
That's true. You can't. Yeah.
You can't. Then
unless you're Joe Rogan, in which case you can kind of get there. Yeah.
Joe Rogan talks to everybody.
In which case you get canceled by CNN. Yeah. Or tried to. Yeah.
Politicians getting information. See, I would love to say that we should rely on the resources available to us in our bureaucracy, CIA, FBI, but it's clear that there are some type of deep state-esque interests at play. I think a lot of we're going to war in all these different places, and these generals are gun ho probably on the coffers of Lockheed Martin or something like that. So I don't know.
A sponsor of this podcast, actually. Kidding. Just just a sponsor of the Cornell Engineering Department.
Gotcha.
Anyways,
so I don't know how much we can trust the bureaucrat, the bureaucracy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's gonna have to come from independent think tanks and research.
Okay.
I think that is a good step. But those think tanks and research need to have high disclosure on where they're getting their information from. And their funding
as
well. And their funding, and their funding particularly. That's what I meant to say, not even information, funding.
Yeah, I mean this is the work I'm hoping to do.
Yeah.
In terms of like formal policy, and most of it's not direct policy work. It's communicating existential hazards and existential risk ideas and effective altruism ideas to people in positions of power, right? And that is a task that is the magnum opus of communication. It's one part of the trifecta of communication in terms of existential risk and effective altruism, because currently we don't have the right rhetoric, right? We don't exactly get taught to be great orators when we're in undergrad most of the time, and I mean at least outside of Dyson, but or if you're a lazy philosophy student, like Coleman in a past life may have been. But I think the trifecta is communicating to industry experts, right? Conferences, and that one's the most straightforward. There's already avenues that we can leverage for that, right? And then the other one is general public, right? And the general public is to find the people, motivate the people with the right ideas. Right action is based off of right ideas. That's something that Aristotle is. I'm deeply thankful for him for pointing out. That idea is fundamental to me. That's an idea that I am hoping to get tattooed on me quite soon here.
Okay.
So that one we can square away, but the last one is the political question. It's people in power. It's people in power.
Tattoos real quick.
Yeah.